Today we'll be discussing an important topic that's particularly relevant during periods of budget constraints by focusing on how fleets can dramatically improve vehicle productivity through motor pool management, specifically for VA fleets. As a way of introduction, my name is Ron Katz, and I'm Senior Director of National Accounts here for Agile. We're a software company based in Chantilly, Virginia, and today I'm pleased to be joined by a panelist that operates a really effective fleet at the VA Healthcare System in Roseburg, Oregon, Robert Doyle. Robert and I are going to split up today's presentation. Robert's going to begin really today by sharing a bit of real-world experience and some of the challenges that he's faced when he took over responsibility for the Roseburg fleet. He'll be discussing his vision for improving vehicle utilization and reducing fleet operating costs, and lastly, describe a few real-world improvements that have been achieved through automating his vehicle management practices. I'll then look to sort of build on Robert's message by discussing how each of you might be able to write your own success story and benefit from some of the tools and the approaches that were implemented and adopted at the VA Healthcare System in Roseburg. But before we start, I want to let you know that we'll be recording today's session and making this content available to each of you in the days ahead. So feel free, sit back, relax. Should you have any questions during the session, just enter them in the chat function, and we'll be sure to pick them up as we move through the session, or certainly at the end when we get to the Q&A portion. So with that bit of background complete, I'm going to turn the microphone, if that's okay, over to you, Robert.
Okay. Anyway, I've been doing this for about 4.5 years now here at the Roseburg VA. Grew up here in Roseburg, joined the service, left for 21 years, came back, and I've always wanted to continue serving our veterans. So this was just an ideal situation for me to be able to jump into this position. One of the challenges that really got me going, looking for an automated type structure, is we have several sister locations throughout Oregon that I have vehicles at that I'm responsible for, and being able to identify those quickly, knowing exactly what's going on with them. Are we getting our oil changes done? Are they being scheduled out? Are we utilizing them efficiently? Those type of things. I was just using an Excel spreadsheet and making phone calls. So our new chief, Jared Tatano, used this system when he was down in California for a very large fleet. They had on-base shuttle service, taxis, ambulance. They were like 300 plus vehicles. So he brought this up to me and he explained how efficient it was for them to use it down there in that large structure. So we decided to reach out to Agile and we gave them a try, and now we've fully implemented their processes. We've also installed a key kiosk, which allows us to provide the keys to the GOVs out of our dispatch fleet to the nurses and doctors and such that need them basically on a 24-hour basis. Prior to that, I had to be here to hand the keys out, or I had to tap the shoulder of someone else to take care of that for me. Well, now they just come in, they've already set up their online reservation. The vehicle is ready. It shows it's full of fuel. I know that the oil change has been done. The vehicle is ready to go. They can come in, grab the keys anytime they want, and they travel on. It does not require me to be sitting in this office to provide them anything. They can just go do their job. And so it kind of put me in the background now, which is where I need to be in order to, keep all of my paperwork right, do all of my online updates, those type of things. It has really helped me a bunch. One of the neat things that this process or this company provides is the ability for the user to just use their ID card to log into the kiosk system versus the putting in their username and stuff, which really speeds up the process and makes a positive ID on the driver as well. So that is one thing that we have ordered up and we are soon to have installed, is the RFID integration, so we can make it a little bit easier for the user when they come in to grab their keys.
How about on GPS today, Robert? How are you using that today in the health center?
Right. One of the very first things I do in the morning is I bring up 2 items on my computer. That's the kiosk, which shows exactly what keys are available, which ones have been checked out. And it shows my schedule for the day, what vehicles are about to go out, what the departure times are, where they're going. And then the other item that I bring up every morning is my GPS, which is through FleetCommander GPS Insight. And that shows the exact location of the vehicles, if they're running, if they're idling. I can find them, I can zoom in and put it onto a satellite view if I want to, and see exactly where these vehicles are. I can tell if I get a speed alert. Okay, well, this vehicle's doing 75, 80 miles an hour. I can view exactly where that vehicle is, when it happened. And I can, because I'm familiar with the local area, I can see if that's going downhill or not. So it's kind of a neat process to absolutely be able to verify where vehicles are. Something that came up that was really neat is we had a couple no-shows since I've developed it, or since we purchased this program. So they would call me and say, hey, where is so-and-so? I can go through, look at my schedule, see when that vehicle departed. I can then go to my GPS screen and tell exactly where it is. The program itself doesn't allow communication to and from the vehicle, but it does give me exact location, what it's doing, the speed. So if it's stopped off someplace where cell signal is not available, and that happens a lot in Oregon because of the mountainous region, I can tell the individual that's concerned exactly where that vehicle is. And if need be, they can send help to go help the vehicle. I've had that instance where a vehicle did not show, it was out of cell phone range, and come to find out the driver had hit a deer and basically totaled the vehicle. And we were able to determine that by using the GPS Insight GPS program. And I had somebody there within 20 minutes to go help the individual out and transfer the items that were in the dispatch rig. It was a lifesaver.
And I know also, Robert, you're also taking odometer details that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes from the vehicle. When they bring the vehicle back, it actually concludes the reservation and fills in the returning mileage.
You bet. Which is really neat, because sometimes the people don't really report their mileages correctly. So this gives it within, I don't know, a quarter of a mile of what is on the vehicle. And then I know anytime I go through and update my information to GSA, then I know exactly what the mileage is, and it's correct when I submit it at the end of each month.
Mm-hmm. And then, Robert, here's sort of a breakout of the environment that you're operating here today using this technology and some of the benefits you see relative to the kiosk.
Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, like I discussed,
so you've got it in three locations, right?
Yeah. Well, 2 of them are using the actual locked kiosk box, where the individuals have to make a reservation online, and then they can come in, they sign into the computer. It shows that they've got a vehicle on reserve. They can log it out at that point. The door opens, they grab the keys and the credit card associated with that vehicle, and off they go. And immediately the system updates and let me know that those keys have been obtained and the vehicle is on the go. When they return, it's really nice too, because they can just log right back into the system, put the keys in, and that vehicle shows immediately that it is ready to be checked back out. I also use, on another location, we have 2 more that are manual, not just one, but it's our HBPC program. They've got what we call a mini fleet, where she doesn't have a lockbox. She just keeps the keys, in a locked container inside their office, but it's not part of this kiosk lockbox. Anyway, she still uses the reservation system, so we know who's in the vehicle, when they're going, and when they come back. And it also gives me a really good status on the percentage of use for each vehicle. So that gives us the numbers we need in order to determine, do we need to get rid of a couple rigs, or do we need to purchase a couple more rigs? It's not an unknown anymore. Now we actually have matrix to go through and verify what our fleet needs to be.
Awesome. Well, Robert, thanks so much for sort of giving us a better understanding of your journey and how you're kind of more effectively managing the fleet today through, I guess I'd say, information, let's say, rather than maybe instinct.
Sure.
For a bit of background about me, as I mentioned earlier, I'm the Senior Director of National Accounts here at Agile, but I've worked with a variety of VA fleets on their fleet system initiatives over the years and have a whole lot more years experience in this industry than I care to think about these days. But now, though, I'd really like to spend some time covering a few topics that hopefully will leave you with a little better understanding about how sharing vehicles can benefit your local VA fleet, much like Robert. I'll review some of the practical information about vehicle utilization, how to get your arms sort of around that elusive metric about utilization, and then I'll use this background to highlight the benefits of automated motor pools, sort of extending what Robert talked about, and just show you a little bit about how the system works to kind of support those processes, and then bring Robert back in to help me kind of conclude this. And then lastly, I guess what I do want to talk about lastly before I let you go is how you can sort of streamline some of the mandatory reporting for what today I know are way too hard for most VA fleets. That tends to be things like home to work reporting and fast reporting, things like that. So I'll start my portion of today's session by pausing just to consider the role that fleet plays within a VA organization. Obviously, without vehicles, the VA would have a really hard time delivering the needed services to your internal customers, like Robert talked about, the doctors, the nurses, the social workers, the administrators, as well as, of course, your patients. With your underlying sort of mission, the role of the fleet manager is really to ensure that the organization has, the proper mix of equipment to effectively deliver your services, and then manage these assets as efficiently as possible to ensure that you have the right type of vehicle always available kind of when and where they're needed. However, the business of fleet over time has become really pretty complex, made even more so today by the river of data that seems to kind of flood your inbox and your spreadsheets and your phones sort of every day. So sometimes it can be really hard to access the fundamental metrics that highlight the efficiency and the effectiveness of your operation. Like the VA in Roseburg, before they implemented FleetCommander, you may not have a local system in place that really helps you to easily understand the day-by-day usage of your fleet. Your health center may not have a clear and concise set of policies regarding the acquisition, the use, and the disposal of the fleet. You may have vehicles in inventory that used to serve a valid purpose, but the mission of that particular department may have changed over time. Maybe you have departments that want to keep just a few vehicles in case they might need them at some point in the future. We all have that, right? Or what can often be the case, the fleet budget could be based on the historical trends rather than forward-looking needs of the organization. Really, no matter the reason, without clear and easy to understand metrics, it's really hard to determine if your fleet utilization is in line with, really the standards that need to be maintained at the VA. So the key to understanding utilization is really being able to easily understand the composition, the makeup of your fleet, and describe it in discrete numbers. So if you look at these two pictures, you or your supervisor might draw completely different conclusions about a fleet, right? But if you had to share a story about those two fleets with your management and seek funding for additional vehicles or convince a department to give up their underused vehicles, you probably find that can be a bit challenging. So both these situations might be correct during certain times of the year or based upon a particular department's need. But either way, it's often the case that you'll have a hard time convincing management about a reasonable plan without accurate and meaningful metrics. So usage metrics, utilization metrics are a critical component to making informed and fact-based decisions to drive change. So what's a meaningful utilization metric? Well, I wish there was sort of a single number that worked for everyone, but over the years, the only consistent thing that I've found in fleet is that really everybody in this business calls what we do fleet. So if you look at this simple formula, most fleets really need to understand how many available vehicles they operate, right? That's the capacity. So how many vehicles do you have? And then how many vehicles do you need to support the mission? Well, that's the demand. So in this case, if this VA fleet operates 10 vehicles and they only have 5 of them that are used on a regular basis, well, that's obviously 50% utilization. However, when looking at utilization, there could be some things that make using this simple formula a bit more involved, as vehicles might be out for repair, right? And that can obviously influence utilization. Or if you need to augment a fleet with outside rentals, or allow certain staff to use their own personal vehicles for some reason or another, it's entirely possible that you may have a situation where you actually have insufficient vehicles to meet the daily needs of the fleet. Really, any metric that you might consider to help you better understand how and why your fleet's being used can help you drive meaningful savings. So many of you probably have a metric in place. I know this is the case at a lot of VAs that I talk to, that in order for a department or a person to justify a vehicle, they need to drive a certain amount of mileage, let's say a month. So let's say it's 800 miles. Obviously, in this case, if a driver travels 950 miles, well, their utilization is about 120%. The bottom line is you need to have a few key operating metrics, and any metric is better than no metric at all. Okay? It's really as simple as that. You know, how can implementing an automated vehicle sharing system, help at the VA? Well, as we've sort of been discussing through this presentation with Robert and myself, reductions in operating budgets have become the norm, right? So delivering efficiencies and savings is really no longer something a manager can aspire to. It's really becoming a mandate for survival, if you will. So the benefits of implementing an automated motor pool are frankly pretty straightforward. By limiting the number of departmentally or individually assigned vehicles and moving some of these vehicles into a shared pool, fleets can rapidly make these shared vehicles available to a larger user community, dramatically reducing, carrying costs. With real-time visibility over the demand of these vehicles versus the capacity and types of vehicles in a pool, well, VA fleets can optimize the mix and the types of vehicles within the pool, offering, potentially cleaner, newer, safer, nicer vehicles for the user community, which makes it, more pleasant for them. By automating the reservation, the approval, and the key management practices, just like Robert did, VA fleets can dramatically reduce the burden on transportation staff. And with integrated key control, you can provide secure 24/7 access to vehicles while tracking the custody of the keys. Who has the keys? And then lastly, with an automated vehicle sharing solution, fleets can gain real-time access to utilization and performance metrics, allowing fleet managers to more effectively manage the fleet, using information and metrics. So how does an automated motor pool system work? For those of you that haven't seen it before, or perhaps haven't traveled to Roseburg, Oregon to visit with Robert, well, it really starts with being able to support 3 big areas of functional needs. Okay? You need to be able to support the scheduling and easy access to vehicles. That's really about allowing people to easily go online and make a reservation. And then all the business rules and logic that controls when people can take vehicles, which vehicles they can take, hours of operation, auto-generated emails, enforcing all of the rules and validation needed to make the process really elegant. You need to be able to support dispatch. That's basically how you give people access to the vehicles, right? Give them the keys. So as Robert said, you could have a mini pool with someone who basically dispatches vehicle, gives people the keys. Or you can work with an integrated key control solution, which I'll show you in just a moment. And then lastly, the real reason why people go through the hassle of implementing technology, it's about reporting. It's about metrics. It's about streamlining process and really making it easy to gain visibility over what's going on with the fleet so you can turn kind of insights into, let's call it actions. The key is you make it easy. So it starts with having a VA-specific site. This site would be configured for each VA health center that we're working with. And someone could go online, log in, and basically click the little button that says, I want to make a reservation. And based upon the user's access credentials, they may be able to select a vehicle that could be, let's say, a daily rental or a long-term assignment, perhaps. If there's multiple sites or locations where vehicles are assigned, perhaps the user has the opportunity to select a site. If all of your vehicles are in one location and someone can only take the vehicle out for an hourly basis, well, they wouldn't see this screen. Then what the user does is fill in a screen or a form that has just the information you need to support your reservation process. At a minimum, with the VAs we work with, it's typically when are you picking up, when are you returning it, maybe what vehicle type do you need. I need a sedan, I need an SUV, I need a pickup truck. The key to this process is when they're done, they just click next and they get an auto-generated email, with a VA logo on it that basically says, okay, Ron, you're good to go. You can pick your vehicle up at 2 o'clock on Tuesday. The key to this whole process is it's highly configurable, right? So we can set the system up where it can default fields. It can make any field mandatory or not. We can pre-populate data. It's all about making it really easy for the person to just go online, make a reservation, and be done. At the back end, though, what we need to do is we need to give the transportation team some tools, and Robert referenced this, to kind of get instant visibility over what's going on with their fleet. And we do that using a suite of dashboards. And I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to highlight one and tell you a little bit about what you're looking at here. So on the left and right-hand side of the screen, this happens to represent those vehicles that are going out today. So the day started, we had 22 vehicles. As they depart, they drop off the list. If the vehicles due back later in the day, they show up over here. Things that are in red are obviously past due. Here in the body of the screen, we're rendering sort of the composition of the fleet. We're rendering real time on this dashboard the demand versus capacity. So in this case, this fleet has 30 vehicles, and this is actually hour by hour usage of those 30 vehicles, right? Rendered real time. On the lower left corner, we've got these suite of hyperlinks that typically have, stoplight colors, right? Red, amber, green, telling you things that you need to action. And these are all hyperlinks that render, vehicles that are late for returning, people that have made change requests. Perhaps you've got canceled requests. All of these things are going to show up on this little toolbar so you can easily view what's going on with the fleet. In fact, we even have the ability to have the system capture customer satisfaction information. So when people bring vehicles back, the system can send them an auto-generated email asking them for their feedback on their experience of using the vehicle sharing solution. And then that data gets aggregated and collated automatically so that you can view what the performance, if you will, of your motor pool is. At the end of the day, it's about giving the transportation team sort of instant access to what's going on with the fleet. But your customers, they could care less about this. This really isn't important to them. In fact, they don't even see this. What your customers care about is really how do they get access to the vehicle. So they made a reservation, and now it's time to pick it up. Well, as Robert said, you may have a mini pool, which is a location that could just have a small handful of vehicles, and it kind of makes sense to leave the keys there with someone behind a desk, and someone will just dispatch the vehicle. They'll walk up and say, I'm here, and they'll give them the keys and send them on their merry way. But a lot of our VAs really want to provide, as Robert said, sort of that 24/7 secure access, and we do that using key control solutions. All right, these key control solutions are a fully integrated tool, if you will, that come in a variety of shapes and sizes and configurations to meet our clients' very specific needs. So, the VA in Columbia, South Carolina, put in some of these where it's actually an outdoor kiosk. So this kiosk is out, if you will, by the parking lot. These key boxes come from small to really big. They even can provide this little thing here, which we call a mail slot. If you look at this little black slot under a key, what that's about is we're actually securing not only the key, but the fuel card. So when a driver accesses a vehicle, they take the key, they actually get the fuel card along with the key, and they have to return the fuel card when they return the key. All right, but the whole process that we're looking to enable here, again, I mentioned it earlier, it's all about making it easy and elegant. And the last thing you want a user to have to do is work with some small touch screen or you really have to learn how to use the system. So what we do is we utilize something we call a kiosk. In a kiosk, is an 18-inch all-in-one kind of touchscreen monitor. And the experience of picking up a vehicle is much like you would experience when you're interacting with a kiosk at an airport to pick up your boarding pass, right? So when it's time to get your vehicle, you walk up to the kiosk, you put your finger on the touchscreen and say, I'm here, I'm going to check out a vehicle. What then shows up is a place to log on. So you put in your username and password and you click the log on button. In Robert's case, what he's looking to do is actually integrate this to the employee badges, where the employee walks up and they swipe their badge and they don't even have to log in because the system recognizes who that person is from their badge and logs them in automatically. Then what happens is the user actually is presented with their confirmation, their reservation. They don't have to remember a number because the system's smart enough to know, I'm James Buchanan, Butch, and I'm just going to walk up and there's my confirmation. I put my finger on it. Up comes a screen that says, okay, here's your vehicle. It's license plate 1KR3340. There's the fuel level. It's parked in G7. We can render whatever information a client might want here. So this could be information that they filled in on their reservation, and you might provide them the opportunity to change it or not. But they basically click checkout, and now the kiosk communicates with the key box, right? You get the little swirling icon, whatever that's called, and it says, okay, your key is in slot number 12. This time remaining, we typically set this to 60 seconds so it counts down, and it basically says, hey, your key is in slot number 12. You open up the key box, slot number 12, key number 12 has a little LED light that's lit next to it. All the rest of the keys are secure, right? So they open the door, take the key, they're good to go. Now they go drive the vehicle. When they're done, they kind of come back and reverse the process, right? So they walk up, they put their finger on the screen to check in the vehicle. There's their confirmation. You say, yep, that's what I want. And oh, by the way, make sure the vehicle's clean and you haven't left trash inside, or whatever policies or compliance stuff that's important to you and your organization. Now up comes a screen where you ask the driver to input some information, all right? And again, this is user definable. We can capture as much or as little information as you want, but most of our clients want to capture certainly some information about, well, where'd they park the vehicle? That's kind of important. Maybe you want to know how much fuel's in the vehicle. You probably want to get their odometer when they bring the vehicle back. Obviously, the system is going to validate that the odometer that's input is a valid number, right? You want to make sure that you get good data there. So the system's going to enforce some rigor around that. You may want the driver to be able to share some information about, their experience or if there's something wrong with the vehicle. And obviously, if they type in any notes in here, when they check the vehicle in, the system's going to notify the transportation team that, in this case, this car steers to the right and it may need an alignment. And that's it. They click check-in. In Robert's case, if we're integrating this to, in his case, GPS Insight or perhaps even Geotab, we have the ability where when someone turns off the ignition, the system automatically gets an update from Geotab or GPS Insight and actually updates the odometer value automatically, grays it out so the person can't type over it, and it's going to update the record, and now the person opens the door and puts the keys back. Now, the important thing to think about here is that we've really automated the process where someone goes online, they make a reservation. The system's going to track who they are they authorized to drive a VA vehicle? The system's going to know when they take the vehicle, and they're going to know when they return it. And we're going to have valid odometer and mileage information to support, your reporting needs. And that's great if your strategy is always that someone has to make a reservation to access a vehicle. But there's many cases in VA environments where certain people need sort of instant access to a vehicle. And we actually support that with something we call grab and go. So authorized users have the ability to walk up to the kiosk and say, I want to grab and go with a vehicle. So they put their finger on the screen, and then up comes an image of the types of vehicles that they're allowed to check out. So if they're allowed to take out, a wheelchair cutaway, well, then they get a picture of that. If they can't, they don't. If it's a golf cart, it shows up. If they can't drive a golf cart, well, they don't get a picture of that. But basically, the driver just says, okay, I want one of those. Up comes a screen. All right, and we're smart enough to know that because the person's checking out the vehicle now, we know when they're taking it, but you probably want to know when you think they're going to be bringing it back. Again, you might want to capture some other information about the journey, who they are, perhaps, what department they're with or why they're taking the vehicle. But basically, they fill in whatever fields they want. They click continue. They get the same screen they got before that says, okay, here's the vehicle, here's where it's parked, there's the fuel level. You check it out, you take the keys, and you go. So again, the whole strategy here is to really make this process as elegant and easy as possible and eliminate the need of the transportation people to interact with this in any way, shape, or form. It's completely automated. All right? So, you know, the key control solution is great at streamlining process around the reservation and the dispatch of vehicles and all the reporting that goes with it. But another primary reason why organizations go through the headache, if you will, of buying and implementing fleet technology is also to streamline what can often be time-consuming, you know, labor-intensive process, right? While also giving you tools you need to generate, you know, actionable intelligence through reporting, et cetera, right, about driving change. So a good example of how this can be leveraged to make your life easier is actually with something we call the mileage collection tool set. So this flexible tool set really provides the capability for those VA locations that need it to automate the mileage collection process. This really allows your staff and drivers with assigned vehicles to easily report their daily or monthly usage using an online data collection tool. These tools really allow an organization to collect trip details, usage details, or month-end mileage and expense details, while integrated email tools allow the transportation staff to easily send reminders, if you will, to chase those drivers that may have neglected to report their vehicle usage details on a timely basis. So the process really begins with rendering to the driver a flexible form. This is adaptable, that can be structured to capture only the details that are needed to support the VA's required mileage collection needs, right? In this case, the user simply selects whether the trip is personal or business related. Perhaps it's, you know, maybe they're reporting their commute distance. The beginning mileage automatically is rendered from the last mileage, so all the person has to do is put in the ending mileage. It's as simple as that. If there's a need to collect additional details, perhaps how or why the vehicle was used or additional comments, the adaptable form can be configured to capture really only the necessary information you need to support your process. Of course, all the relevant details are input by the user and retained and available for reporting, right? So you can generate reporting whenever or however you need to support your mileage reporting needs. And then lastly, FleetCommander's integrated email creation tool set allows transportation staff to easily run a routine where they can select what time duration they'd like to generate an email distribution list, right? So, tell me my drivers who haven't reported their mileage in the last, in this case, 30 days. Then you can input a little message. Please remember to add your fuel usage, or, you can send them an Instagram if you want. Then you click another button and it says, okay, generate, and what happens is it generates a mail merge list of those drivers who haven't reported their mileage, in this case, in the last 30 days. And then what the system does is it sends an auto-generated email to the driver that says, hey, Bill, you need to fill in this information. And oh, by the way, there's a hyperlink. If they click that, it brings them directly back to the mileage reporting tool in the form. They fill in their values, hit save, and they're done. So it's really about making it easy and elegant to control or check in, if you will, on those drivers that maybe haven't done their mileage reporting on a regular basis. Of course, one of the most taxing and difficult tasks that a fleet manager in a federal environment needs to complete each year is the annual and mandatory FAST reporting, right? So our technology has the ability to automatically consolidate and aggregate all of your fleet's operating data and cost data into the 4 reporting sections that are acquired by FAST. You basically eliminate all the countless days of backbreaking effort, if you will, while really improving the quality of data provided to the DOE. So within the system's vehicle record, within FleetCommander's vehicle record, we capture all the mandatory fields and data attributes that are required by INL and DOE. And then using a simple reporting interface, it allows the user to sort and filter and summarize the data that's needed to generate, your inventory report or your usage report. Perhaps it's your fuel reporting. If you'd like to generate a summary report for your visit on your individual health centers and clinics, you can even run an SF82 summary report whenever or however you want. At the end of the day, the primary goal of technology should be to make your life easier and allow you to sort of do more with less. So by supporting all of the data attributes for fast reporting, and as the vehicles are used throughout the year, the system's going to automatically aggregate that information and give you the reporting you need. So in summary, I guess during these difficult times, when federal fleets are being buffeted by uncertainty and continually pressured to find cost savings, one of the most effective ways to gain some semblance of control is to focus on areas that you can define and then change, right? So by concentrating on developing meaningful utilization metrics, you can ensure that you only operate the right types and the right quantity of vehicles and begin to deploy them so they're available really when and where they're needed. With accurate and timely utilization data, you can begin to optimize the composition of your fleet to reflect the current and future needs of the organization. With automated motor pool systems, you can eliminate labor-intensive process, all while reducing costs and improving customer satisfaction of your staff and of your patients. And with systematized reporting, you can make it easier for staff to report monthly mileage and even make that annual fast reporting headache sort of a thing of the past. Remember, you're not alone, right? So Agile has dozens of similar VA fleets just like yours. Robert's operation in Roseburg, is a perfect example that's using this technology. So if you have questions or you'd like to speak with like-minded sort of fleet professionals like Robert or others that have successfully implemented some of the suggestions that we touched on today, just let us know and we can put you in touch. Now, I guess I'd like to take a few minutes to respond to any questions that may have come in during the presentation. I know Sharon was sort of keeping tabs on these things. And as we do, keep in mind that we have lots and lots of tools and resources available on our website, ranging from thought-provoking white papers such as the ones shown here. We've got that fleet waste calculator, to client case studies and tools to help develop an internal business case for implementing vehicle sharing technology. So with that, I know I've spoken relatively quickly here, but I did want to cover a fair bit of material in a relatively short period of time. Sharon, do we have any questions?
Yeah, we actually have a question for Robert. How well has the system been received by your drivers, doctors, and nurses?
At first, they weren't too crazy about it until the first day that I showed them how to get their key out of the kiosk. And from then on, they were hooked.
That's great. That's great. And how about the implementation process?
Robert, I apologize. Robert, if I can jump in there one quick thing. I do have a question for you. Was there much of a need to train the users on how to use the system, or was it intuitive enough that they could sort of figure it out on their own?
I have gone through, just because I like the personal touch of it all, I've gone through each individual and walked them through the checkout process on their very first checkout. From then on, I think I've only had maybe 1 or 2 customers that have had any issues at all. The biggest issue that I have found since we've implemented the key kiosk is them signing in and getting a message that there is no reservation on file for you. The issue there has been, and we have since fixed it, is we had to change our time of pickup. And the customers learn this now. They were coming in 2-3 hours early to grab their key for a 1 o'clock in the afternoon departure. Well, they're not really understanding, okay, well, we're trying to utilize these vehicles to the maximum extent. That vehicle is already being used to go to Walmart and it'll be back in time for you to grab it at your scheduled departure time. So now they know.
Awesome.
Now they're going through and they're scheduling it more accurately, and instead of just happenstance like it was happening before. And it has really increased the utilization of the vehicles to be able to share them, not just for a whole day, but portions of a day, sometimes just for an hour. And then another group will use it for another hour, and it's great.
Awesome. I'm sorry, Sharon, I interrupted your question to Robert. Maybe you want to do that again?
Yeah, no problem. We have one question here. Can some of the Agile Fleet automation be integrated with outside telematics like Verizon or Geotab, as well as outside key control like Keeper systems?
Great question. So on the integration with outside telematics like Verizon, Geotab, et cetera, the answer is yes. Some providers have more robust capabilities than others, let us say. So GPS Insight, Geotab, we've got this webhook capability, we call webhook internally, where I think this question came from Lance, where when someone turns off the ignition and walks back to the kiosk, within 18 seconds of turning off the key, we already have the updated odometer loaded into FleetCommander, right? So that's the best of all worlds. Verizon Connect doesn't have that capability today. We've talked to them. We have some clients that use them. So to date, we've been unable to do that with them, not because of us, but because of their capabilities. As far as integrating with other key control solutions, like keeper systems, we actually can't. Okay, these key boxes that I showed you pictures of earlier are built on specification for us, and they have some very specific capabilities and functionality that systems like Keeper and others don't have. So we're very selective about who we work with from a key control perspective, because at the end of the day, you want to provide a really bulletproof solution for your customer. As Robert, probably can attest, these key boxes, they're bulletproof. They just work. And the goal is to make it like that for all of your customers. So,
Ron, real quick on this. There was been a couple situations where we have lost internet on base or on campus, and the kiosk was still working because it's a standalone process that receives its information from downtown sources. And it has just been awesome for me to be able to continue on working, having the kiosk continue working. And just because we've lost internet here on the VA campus, that doesn't slow down our doctors and nurses from proceeding with their mission.
Great, thank you. Oh, and by the way, that at least popped something in my head, maybe not yours in the group. Some people do ask the question of, well, what happens if the power goes out? Can you still get at the keys? And the answer is yes. I mean, there's battery backup on these things, as well as there's an option for someone with an appropriate code to literally open up the door and get at whatever keys need to be garnered. The other thing is that if someone does experience a situation where, let's say they bring the vehicle back and they bring the key back, and then they realize they locked their cell phone in the car, or their purse or their briefcase, or whatever the case may be. One of the neat things about the tool is that from the administrators, so Robert and his team, can actually remotely access those key boxes from their desktop or even from sitting at home on their easy chair.
Absolutely. I've actually done that, and it has just been a blessing.
We have a question here from, looks like it's Leon Ferran. I hope I said that right. How hard was it to get IT and security team to grant access to web scheduling and also allow for personnel to gain access to the kiosk? That's a great question. So the way we handle that with the VA, and frankly all of our federal clients, right, because our clients include people like the NSA and the Navy that have, really stringent security requirements, not that the VA doesn't. So what Robert was alluding to was that we actually provide this technology to our VA clients using secure cradle point routers. So the kiosk and the key box communicate to the internet over a cellular network that's delivered with the key box. Okay? So we're never on the VA network. Right? So the VA IT and security team aren't involved because we're not on the VA network. And those that do get involved have blessed this because we're not on the VA network. The users who make reservations are accessing FleetCommander over the internet through the web browser. So whether they have a phone or a tablet or their desktop sitting at their desk, all they do is they launch their browser, log into FleetCommander, and make their reservation. And then when it's time to pick up the keys or access the key control of the kiosk, that's accessed over the internet using a secure cellular router.
Okay, we have a couple more questions. here. How long and involved is the implementation process?
Great question. I guess I'll take that, Robert. Sounds like it's one for me.
Absolutely.
So a typical implementation for us is about a 4 to 6 week process for the software. The hardware, the key control and kiosks, the hardware usually takes 4 to 6 weeks to deliver. Okay, because again, if you remember, I mentioned it's built on spec for us. So, you know, therefore, a typical implementation in a VA environment, if we're using key boxes and kiosks, is typically a 2 to 2.5 month process. Most of the heavy lifting, of course, is done by us, because really all that we're going to be entering into the system or supporting for you is really information about the health centers, information about the drivers, and then information about your vehicles. Once we've added that information into the system, we pretty much can get the system up and running. Sharon, I'm going to jump in a question here from Peter. Hello, Peter. It's been a while since we spoke. GSA is coming out with their own GPS system installed in new vehicles. Will that be a problem? Well, the GSA preferred platform that's coming out with the new vehicles is provided by Geotab. Okay, and that's one of the GPS providers I mentioned earlier. So we natively, meaning easily, can integrate with Geotab and support that webhook where we automatically get that odometer update when someone turns off the ignition. And we've done that for many VAs are already using some Geotab technology today. So as the new vehicles come in, they can be added into the system, you know, without an issue at all.
Okay, another question here. How does the system help with policy enforcement and communication?
Ooh, great question. We're dealing with this right now with the VA in Bay Pines, Florida. We're just going to be starting a project with them. And they're in the process of sort of rewriting or tweaking their policy statements. So within FleetCommander, we can do a number of things. First and foremost, we can take the policy, the written policy for your health center, and load that into the system. And we can set the system up where the first time someone logs in, every time they log in, or once a year when they log in. So in other words, it's adaptable, whatever frequency you want. It actually will present the user with the VA policy about safe driving, and they have to acknowledge it. And the system's actually going to, you know, from an audit perspective, track that Ron Katz acknowledged the VA policy on, you know, June 18th at, you know, or June, I guess today's the 10th, June 10th at 2:50 in the afternoon. Additionally, there might be certain components about your policy that you want to reinforce. Let's say it's about, you know, when you take a VA-owned vehicle, you have to drive the speed limit, you have to keep it clean, you need to return it with, you know, half a tank or more of fuel, etc. All of that information can be rendered to the user throughout the reservation process. So you might want to show that to the user, that portion of the policy, when they're making a reservation. You might want to show it to the driver, a portion of that policy, when they check the vehicle out. You may want to, you know, reinforce that and show a portion of that policy when they check the vehicle in. Because of the user definability, the flexibility of our tool, we can present the user that information almost whenever or wherever you want through the reservation and return process. Additionally, and I will, that brought something to mind, I know some of you have an annual safe driver training policy where someone has to take a course, you know, once a year, let's say. Or perhaps your strategy is that you want to check or validate that when someone makes a reservation, they have a valid license. Well, again, in FleetCommander, we can capture those details about what's the expiration date of a driver license, or, you know, when does the safe driving policy expire? In other words, when do they need to re-up again and take that course? Well, as part of the system, when someone makes a reservation, if you want the system to basically say, is that person certified to drive the vehicle? In other words, have they taken the safe driver training within the past 12 months? Therefore, we can reserve a vehicle. The system will allow them to make a reservation. However, if their safe driving test expires, either before or during the reservation, we can set the system so it won't allow them to make a reservation and notify them that you need to communicate with the transportation department because your safe driver training, has expired. So all of these things can be woven into the reservation process, all without programming or development. So that, again, you can make this a really simple and easy process for people to go online, make a reservation, and gain access to vehicles, assuming they're authorized to do that.
Okay, 2 more questions. One, how scalable is the system? And if you have multiple motor pool locations, can they be managed from one main location, or do we have to have multiple managers?
Great question. So, Robert, do you want to take that one? Because that's sort of your world, right?
You betcha. I would say that it's unlimited. The only thing that you need is someone that is familiar with the kiosk and the capability to go in and pull a key if necessary, if something goes wrong with the system, where you can still get a key and get it to the individual so you don't impact their mission. But that's very
one is Engineer Hawks.
And it wouldn't be an issue at all.
Yep. And as Robert said, the system supports 1 to unlimited, let's call it locations or sites. So we have a VA out in the West Coast. Peter, you're on this call, where I think that the system's deployed in 3 or 4 different sites.
Okay, and last one is, can you share assets other than vehicles, such as child car seats, wheelchairs, medical equipment, and the like?
Great question. Whoever asked that, the answer is you bet. And in our world, an asset's an asset, and anything can be shared. So, to Sharon's point, you might have specialty equipment at a particular health center. I had a picture on the grab and go of golf carts and maybe facilities vehicles. Some of our VA clients, need the ability to, when they pick up or reserve a vehicle, they actually want a vehicle with a wheelchair lift. So it's a minivan with a wheelchair lift. So we can add those values to the reservation process. So when someone makes a reservation, they have the option to tick a box that says, you know what, I need a vehicle with a wheelchair lift. So the system will, again, automatically only assign that person, assuming they have the right to take a vehicle with a wheelchair lift, So again, the whole key to the strategy of what we're trying to do is make it really easy and intuitive and simple for someone to go online and gain access to whatever type of vehicle they're authorized to drive. And then control the use of that vehicle such that when they bring it back, we know when they brought it back. They have to put the key back in the box. Otherwise, the reservation never gets closed out. And that way, we're ensuring the custody of the key from when they took it to when they return it, as well as the fuel card, if you happen to be using a system that supports the fuel cards as well.
Hey,
as we
Ron,
wind down, then, yep.
something that was really important to me was in the individualism permissions for each individual driver on what they can and cannot do. It's not just helter-skelter, I can sign in, give myself whatever I want, and go get whatever I want. It's very specific as to what vehicle type the individual can check out. It's very definable, which was excellent. That was very important for me in getting this program is, okay, what can I do as the administrator to ensure that the correct people are getting the correct type of vehicle? They can't, someone that is qualified to just go drive a little minivan cannot pick up a van with a wheelchair access capability just because they want to go drive one. Everything is specified exactly what they can do and what they can't, which is just great.
Thank you for clarifying that, Robert. We did have one other question from Daniel Hartling. Do those using grab and go, that's where you walk up to the kiosk and gain instant access to vehicles? still need to log in with a username and password or their employee badge? And the answer is yes, you do. I didn't show that because in deference to time, but in order to grab and go, because what the system is going to do when you log in, it's going to validate, to Robert's point, what he just made, that I have the authority to gain instant access to a vehicle. You know, because there might be some staff, let's just say nurses, that they don't have that option. They have to go online and make a reservation because that's your process. So absolutely, Daniel, they do have to log in.
I've only got just a very few people that have grab and go capability. Basically, the facility chiefs and fleet management. That's just about it.
Yeah, that's right, Robert. As I think about it, I know of a couple VAs where the facilities people have access to grab and go because they're managing the facilities vehicles, so to speak, in the system, where, you know, the doctors and staff in their particular case, they don't do that.
Correct. And grab and go understands the scheduling as well. It's not going to give you a rig that's due out in 10 minutes. It's going to go through and verify that there's a scheduled amount of time. When they go grab and go, they're going to say, okay, well, I want the vehicle or the keys now, but I'm going to return in 1 hour. So it's going to look at the schedule and verify that that vehicle is open and rentable for that 1 hour.
Exactly. Well, you know, we've covered, it's now, you know, a little after 3, and we've covered a lot of information. And I apologize that we had to go so quick, but we did want to, you know, try and make this as informative as possible for the group. But, you know, if you prefer a more personalized touch, you can certainly reach out to Robert, you know, internally using your internal email system, or feel free to reach out to me directly. And I can help you with some, you know, kind of some personal attention, if you will, whether it's a fleet savings assessment or point you to the fleet waste calculator on the website, perhaps a one-on-one demonstration if that's of value. We help a lot of VAs with the procurement process, right? We're on GSA schedule and we partner with a veteran-owned small service-disabled small business. So we tick a lot of the boxes. You know, we can provide statement of works and sole source information and helping to build business cases. At the end of the day, you know, our goal is to be of service to you and help you get more value out of our technology. So if you have questions, other information, and Leon just asked a question, how do we get price information, et cetera, et cetera? Well, that's what you do. You reach out to us and we can pass that along. Again, I mentioned it earlier, we're going to be sending out this information to you subsequently, you know, with a link to and a recording of this, along with my contact details as well. So don't feel like you have to write this down now, but you can access us through our website, obviously, or by email and phone there. Other than that, I mean, gosh, I really appreciate everybody's time. Robert, you've been a star. Thank you so much for helping us out here today. And just everybody have a great afternoon, and please stay safe.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody.